A very good evening, Stats Race Lens users. Welcome, Belmont Racing Festival, day one, just a nightcap away from wrapping up this Thursday, and looking forward to the Friday card and then Belmont Saturday. And we'll spend the next hour, at the very least, with Ellis Starr and with Laffit Pincay III. We'll wade you into the action, a very interesting third leg of the Triple Crown, a tumultuous several days, at the very least a tumultuous 36 hours with favorite Classic Empire sideline, some news affecting Epicaris as well, and it's leaving us with a field of 12 and certainly with players asking a lot of questions. Ellis Starr, good evening.
Good evening, and welcome, everybody. It's pretty tumultuous is a good word, Steve. I like that.
Well, certainly when involved in these broadcasts, Breeders' Cup, Triple Crown, other racing, Laffit Pincay III, and the NBC team, I've seen the tumult that goes on, and Laffit Pincay is always unflappable. LP3, good evening.
Steve, Ellis, great to be on with you guys. Great to be back in New York. For the television presentation, Classic Empire defecting wasn't quite, I'll have another scratching the day before the Belmont Stakes and really having to go back to the drawing board and really having to rebuild that show. But Classic Empire was the story. If you would have written a script about his 3-year-old season, you could have entitled it The Test of the Champion. Belmont Stakes is contested every year. We call it the Test of the Champion. So often there's no champion in the race. This year there was. And from his 3-year-old debut, in which he was disappointing, the foot abscess then, now the same foot abscess, at least in the same area, keeping him from going from a classic win. It's the story I think everyone was following and looking forward to seeing. And how many times can this horse, this team, pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and resurface? Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. It's not serious. We'll see Classic Empire this summer. In the meantime, we're left with a Belmont Stakes. It's still the Belmont Stakes and one of the most important thoroughbred races in the world, but without a superstar.
Indeed. And in fact, while we're talking about health and welfare of the horses, and Ellis, as we open up the Stats Race Lens page to the Belmont Stakes, we'll dive into that first, just because it is such an unusual circumstance where we've got 12 horses, some that kind of arrived on the scene late, including Irish Warcry, who ends up being installed as the post-time, or at least the morning line favorite. Let's talk about Epicaris and yesterday's piece of news out of the enhanced protocols that includes the vet reports. And late yesterday evening, when those reports were perused, Marcus Hirsch and then Jay Privman from the Daily Racing Forum elaborating on a butte shot or what probably is some inflammation coming out of Epicaris' work. And, the Japanese seem unperturbed and, they're going to go forward. But it certainly is enough to make casual players wary about the situation. How do you suggest people view this?
Well, I have to say, first of all, it's a big problem for me, but it's certainly problematic since our race analysis, when we get to talking about the race, he was my top choice. He's a fresh face, and I've got lots of reasons to like him. So it's a concern. Also from a pace perspective, and so we can get into that in a minute, but how you do it is you have to wait. I mean, they said, the last thing I read was they were going to try and take him to the track for his regular not workout, but his regular morning on-track jog tomorrow. And so I guess, fans just need to read Blood Horse or The Forum or any of the other reporters out there. And, on Twitter, I'm sure there'll be a lot of activity. Listen to your show as well, Steve, and determine whether they think he's going to go or not. They're not going to send him if he's not sound. So that's not an issue. The question is, is he going to be over this enough to be a pace factor, which I think we all agree he would be if he had no issue.
Fair enough. Laffit, from your perspective and the way in production meetings that you and the NBC team, how are you going to present this, assuming that Epicaris is still part of the field on Saturday?
Just the facts, man. In terms of the broadcast, just the facts. But for the handicappers, Steve, Ellis, pay attention to the markets overseas. Pay attention to the markets in Japan. What is his price overseas back home? I'm not insinuating we're being rope-a-doped. I'm not saying it's Muhammad Ali playing possum in the corner. What I am saying is that while he exited his work and he had to be treated, those are just negative vibes. And for myself, we both take part, Steve, in the Express Bet wagering guide, and I had Epicaris underneath. I had him as my second horse. I think he is the second most talented racehorse in the field. This has completely thrown me. I have absolutely abandoned ship because of the negative vibes coming out of the Epicaris camp. But if they're going to continue forward, and we'll see how he looks on the tracks, it's not just dealing with what happened exiting the work. It's also the missed training in the meantime. It's been a while since he's raced. But there are a lot of mixed signals, and I know for a horse that I believed in his talent going in, I think he is the best bred horse in terms of a horse that should thrive at the 1.5 mile distance. That style with that speed / stack tactical speed he brings to the party. I don't know what to do with Epicaris. If what is being reported is true and he's having issues and didn't exit the work well and going into the Belmont with those types of ailments, then like I said, abandon ship. But pay attention, if you can, to his price, what he's being offered at overseas back home.
One place people can do that, you've heard me say this before, and certainly the other day with the Epsom Derby and the Epsom Oaks, next week for Royal Ascot, you want to go to oddschecker.com and watch OddsChecker. They'll have the international racing, and you can see what the British betting shops where they're trading. And that's one terrific tool to help you and to compare, what the international marketplace, how they're seeing. And I would also suggest that for the Belmont Gold Cup tomorrow, they're going to have a much better handle on Willie Mullins and Hugo Palmer and that whole set of horses that are going to run in the Gold Cup. Maybe we'll talk about that when we get a chance. Ellis, you're controlling the board. Let's take a look at the Belmont and start to walk through this and your general Belmont approaches. A race too far, as you sometimes hear it referred to, and the 1.5 miles, one of those question marks that you sometimes really don't know until afterwards.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. Before we do that, Steve, do you want to tell all our fans out there about this new special we've got that we haven't had in 6 months and may not have again? Let's get that started, and then I'll be happy to let Laffit talk about his picks, and I'll kick off with mine.
Well, and in fact, for those of you that have been utilizing maybe the one buy 1 month get 3 free, if you're getting close to a renewal, very unique opportunity these next 4 days through Sunday. You can get 50% off of an annual subscription. Essentially, it's $480 worth of value, and $42 a month is what it would net down to. So a chance to save $500. We offered this way back at the beginning when introducing Stats Race Lens, 50% off the annual subscription, a great opportunity, and obviously it would carry you all the way through next Belmont Stakes. So it'd be an easy opportunity to know the calendar year that you're involved in, and really an offer that has only been made once before. So through Sunday, 50% off for an annual subscription, and those of you that are already enjoying and using it, you can take advantage of this. And if you're just getting started using the product, you may not see a better value. So I wanted to make sure to make that offer available to everybody.
And there's no code needed, by the way. Just go to the website and you can take advantage of it. It works out to about $1.50 a day. So it's pretty unique to get that kind of value for unlimited PPs and the power of Raceland for that amount of money.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive in, Ellis, and Laffit. Do you want to open the salvos?
Yeah. I mean, let me get this out of the way. I'm a sucker for Todd Pletcher in the Belmont. Plain and simple, I am a sucker for Todd Pletcher coming off of a Derby effort in the Belmont. I thought Materiality could have challenged American Pharoah a couple of years ago. I didn't go with Destin, but I went with the other Pletcher whose name I can't remember in last year's Belmont, who made his Triple Crown debut in the Preakness. He's just been so good with this maneuver over the years. I do like Taprit. I have him on top. Rags to Riches didn't run in the Derby. She ran in the Oaks, but 36 days later she came back and beat an eventual Horse of the Year in Curlin in the Belmont Stakes. Pletcher had Palace Malice run off in the Kentucky Derby, brought him back 35 days later and won the Belmont Stakes on 4 other occasions. Horses that ran in the Derby, skipped the Preakness, resurfaced in the Belmont, ran second for Todd Pletcher. Bluegrass Cat 2006, Dunkirk, Stay Thirsty, and Destin last year. Taprit, as soon as the results of the Preakness were official after they ran the Preakness, and having the belief that Always Dreaming wouldn't go to the Belmont or that Cloud Computing wouldn't go to the Belmont, right then I zeroed in on Taprit, went back to watch his Kentucky Derby. So much was made of Classic Empire being wiped out at the start of the Kentucky Derby. He was. So was Taprit. He was right next to Irish War Cry. It's well documented. He was bothered at the start of the race. I like how he closed. I think a sneaky good 6th place finish in the Kentucky Derby. If you believe the rail was golden in the Derby, that might put you off Taprit. Always Dreaming was on the fence. Looking at Lee did his best running inside, and so did Taprit. If you buy into that, that might throw you off. I'm a pedigree snob when it comes to the Belmont Stakes. The bottom side of Taprit's pedigree bothers me a little bit, but I'm leaning on Todd Pletcher and the upset and talent that I do think Taprit brings to the party. The issue is the price now, because with all the discussion of how Epicaris exited his work yesterday, that price is going to inflate. I think Taprit probably winds up the second choice. I was against Classic Empire, even though I feel he was the most talented horse going into the Belmont Stakes. I was against him, and I thought that his 4th Grade 1 race in 8 weeks, especially in a 1.5 mile race, that fatigue was going to catch up to him. And if he was running, you're looking at Taprit at 10, 12 to 1. Now I don't feel as great about him at 9 to 2, 5 to 1, whatever price he may be. I'm still sticking with him. I just wish I would be getting a little more bang for my buck, Steve, with Taprit in the Belmont.
I've got very similar feelings, actually. And you know, I also felt ambivalent about Classic Empire. I thought it was very noble that Jack Oxley and the Cassie team were going to soldier on and try for that 4th race in 8 weeks. And, you know, it would be to his credit had he been able to participate. As you suggested, I think long term they're going to be quite happy with how this plays out, because if they're setting their sights on the 3-year-old championship, that 3-year-old championship is up in the air right now, and he is arguably, you know, right in the mix. I mean, how is he not?
It's there for the taking. If you're looking at Haskell, Travelers, maybe Pennsylvania Derby, we'll see about a trip out west for the Breeders' Cup Classic. There's so much racing left. I strongly believe they'll look back at missing the Belmont Stakes as it being a blessing in disguise.
We could play a little ping pong here, and maybe I think we'll be well served, Ellis, if we kind of you two go back and forth on horses that you're considering. You basically overlap with a lot of considerations. If you want to address a little Taprit and then throw out the first horse that you want to discuss.
Well, Taprit's interesting. He did have trouble, as showing here with the little triangle that shows that a horse had trouble. And in some cases, you go look at the video, a lot of horses had trouble with Derby, but he did close, as Laffit mentioned, from 15th to 6th. He wasn't really on my radar because I didn't like his race before in the Bluegrass. And just thinking he might have peaked too soon. You know, I made the case in the Preakness that a couple horses peaked too soon in the Derby, and I was right in a couple of counts, even though I was wrong on the winners of those races. So I think this is unfortunate because you could see a pattern here of Equibase speed figures of 96 to 1 to 1 to 106. And then he did have some trouble in the Bluegrass, did have some trouble. So for me, he wasn't a contender, and as Laffit said now, at lower odds, not so much. I'll touch on Epicaris because I'm going to assume for now that they are going to go on, and we have to be careful. But certainly he was and probably will still be my top pick. But as Laffit said, we have to watch the stories. We have to see how the odds are overseas. We should watch him on the track, etc. But, I mean, he certainly is a fresh horse. He's a horse that's been pointed for this race. You know, one of the notes I made about a couple of horses, which we can talk about why Laffit and I didn't pick, for example, neither of us, I believe, have Irish Warcry or Gormley in our selection. So one of the reasons I did, that's correct. So one of the reasons that I liked Epicaris, one of the reasons I didn't like Gormley and Irish Warcry is because they were both on the fence a few days ago. I mean, this is a race that you have to plan for, like any other race. You can't just make a decision at the last second. Oh, we'll take a shot. He deserves a shot. I don't like hearing that. Is it better? Do you like hearing that, Laffit, when the trainer says that?
Listen, the Triple Crown was off the table after the Derby, from what I understood, with Grand Motion because of the connections with the owners and the Haskell, and I realized that's still on the docket, but they were going to point towards the Haskell. And then I think more so than anything else, Ellis, it was a matter of a lack of competition. Well, we don't have to deal with Always Dreaming going for a Triple Crown, and Cloud Compute is going to skip the Belmont Stakes. The theory, I think, for most horsemen that we've heard the racing axiom for years and years is you don't duck one horse when it comes to a big race. So he has a horse in good form, training well, and it's a classic. So I don't know that necessarily Irish Warcry dragged Grand Motion here, but how good do you need to be to contend in this year's particular Belmont Stakes? And it's just odd to me that, you know, the 10th place finisher in the Kentucky Derby is now the morning line favorite for the Kentucky Derby. I respect him on that every other pattern. He's sitting on a big race, but I will pass.
Yeah, I'm going to pass as well. And you know, when you look at this running line, and I recall visually, and of course anybody can click on the video if you're in it to watch it again, but visually in the race where he made that nice move and you thought he was going to go somewhere at about the 1 1/8 mark, and then he just gave it up. And so you have to wonder if that was the wet track, if that was a distance limitation. I don't know, but whatever the reasons are, I can't take him off a 10th place finish to reverse it all the way to win. And even if Epicaris isn't in, the fact that we do have a morning line favorite and likely post-time favorite that I think is vulnerable, if not false favorite, to use an old term, I think we still have some playable opportunities here. So I said Epicaris was one because we do, in Racelands, for those that don't know, by the way, again, assuming he's running, these figures are Trackmaster Equibase generated figures for foreign races that they do, and they compare favorably to everything else out there. They're on the same scale as the Equibase figures. So that 108 number is very good in terms of what he's done. And of course, if he hasn't lost by a nose that's under snow, he would be 5 for 5. That being said, now I'm going to talk about the horse that I'm probably going to end up on here, especially if Epicaris is out, because Meantime might be the controlling speed in the race. And he opens at 15 to 1 again, maybe a little bit less. A horse that really doesn't have a lot of foundation under him. But you can see here he started out in a one-turn mile and ran second to Patch, came back and ran third to Time to Travel, with a second and third, with him winning and the second horse winning, coming back to win a maiden special, and then the Peter Pan. Peter Pan occasionally has a lot of significance in the Belmont 2014. Total List came out of the Peter Pan and won Christophe Belmont. I like the pattern here of improving figures. This horse is almost like Epicaris in terms of being fresh, not that he ran less than a month ago, but fresh in terms of he doesn't have 6, 8, 10 races this year. He's a horse that just started his career in February of this year. What I probably like most of all is Mike Smith. And for those that aren't paying attention, Mike Smith is leading the North American jockey standings with 15 million. Some of it's from Arrogate, a lot of it is actually. But there's some very interesting things here I looked at to check Mike Smith. So first, for those that don't know, when you click on a jockey or a trainer or a sire or a dam, it takes you right to a situational statistic. We call it individual research. And in this case, it starts with dirt routes. And this is a guy that, where Castellano and Velasquez and everybody else have 400 or 500 mounts in the last 12 running months. Mike Smith has 80 mounts in the last month. And here he is with 26 wins, 52 in the money, 33% wins, and an ROI is -4. You can just dumb bet every one of Smith's horses and beat the takeout by a significant amount here. Now, what's really interesting is if I change this, which I can easily do, to dirt routes, and I'm going to change it to graded. I'm going to change it to, find my note here. I'm going to change it to just stakes races. It gets even better. And this is where you take the 1 or 2 races with Arrogate out of it. I go to all stakes and apply it. And it should just take a minute going through the entire database. So last year, 22 for 62, again, over 33%, and a 7% flat bet profit. And there's a bunch of horses in here. You can sort by finish position. You can see there's not just Arrogate. There's a lot of horses in here. A couple of ones, most of them with low prices, but a couple 11 to 1, 9 to 1, 11 to 1. So the fact that Smith is getting back on, switching back to PPs here, is really interesting. The other fascinating thing for me about Meantime, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, is now with the pace situation. So for those that don't know, again, you could sort the race on running styles. Everything is sortable alphabetically. So you see here that Meantime, Gormley, and Irish Forkfire are the early running type horses in the race. Hatch is a presser. Everybody else is listed as sustained, which means closer. Epicaris is unknown, so he'd be up there. You look at the pace projector that projects based on scenario. Meantime is in front here. Now, if you take the fact that Gormley probably is going to be a little further back than this projection to be, and you take Epicaris out, Meantime could be a lone front runner here and harken back to Zatara, for example, even though Big Brown didn't fire as a horse. So these are all the reasons that I believe Meantime is going to be my bet in the race as a win bet. And if Epicaris is out particularly, he's going to be exactly key top and bottom with a bunch of horses here. So I'll kick it back to you guys and let Laffit get back into his other picks. I know he's got some good ones.
Well, it's just so helpful that the race lens, the pace scenario projector, and putting it out in front of you about who should be where, when, and going, I don't know, off topic for a moment, but just how fitting would it be for Mike Smith to win a classic in wire-to-wire fashion on the same weekend that one of the favorite racehorses he ever rode, one of the most dominant front runners this sport has seen over the last 30, 40, 50 years, Holy Bull, passed away. And again, this is off topic, and this isn't stats, and this isn't about picking winners in the course of the weekend. Holy Bull was one of my all-time favorites. And when you talk to Mike Smith, I think that Zenyatta holds a very special place in his heart. He lights up when he talks about Holy Bull. And I just think that Mike, where he started, where he did most of his damage early on in his career, back in New York, we saw how excited he was when he won the first of his 2 Belmont Stakes. It was always a race that eluded him when he won on Drosselmeyer in 2010. But Mike Smith on a front runner in a Belmont Stakes in this classic, the same weekend Holy Bull passes away, I don't know. I feel like there are some greater forces potentially at work here.
That's awfully sentimental.
Now, it doesn't help you with the handicapping, but just a thought.
Oh, well, handicapping puts you on the horse, right, Laffit?
Well, I'm glad you went to the pace projector, Alice, because there is, I think a case to be made that this pace could be a little bit more juicy than initially thought. And if you're going to swap Irish Warcry out for Classic Empire, you could expect that Irish Warcry is going to be a little bit more into the pace than Classic Empire would have been. I think Gormley is going to be ridden aggressively, and frankly, doesn't Castellano have to at least go forward to establish position on Twisted Tom, who's got plenty of natural speed anyway? I think there's a case here that this pace could be a little faster than your normal Belmont pace. And I will not be surprised if this thing gets a little bit, you know, in the 113 flat range through the halfway point.
Yeah, that's the thing, Steve. I think you might have more horses forwardly placed, but I don't know how fast they go, if that makes any sense. Some traffic and congestion on horses that are on or near the lead, but riders still taking a snug hold, because that's what the Belmont Stakes is all about for the jockeys in their subconscious while they're riding. There's always the concern of moving too soon, the clock, how fast you're going, and saving something because it is a mile and a half.
Understood. I get it. I got a feeling you've got a little bit more pace than people might expect. I mean, and here Ellis is filling up Twisted Tom, who's a very interesting player in here. The Thunder Gulch mare, creative cause, a horse that has got fairly mundane figs, but this is a race that has seen winners that transcend their obvious speed ratings. No matter what speed rating you use, if you look back and you looked at the ball winners, the rulers, the cars, etc., you found plenty of horses who were inexplicable based on the kind of speed that they had displayed. So Twisted Tom, a horse that some people are making cases for. I included him actually in the Express Bet wagering guide as an exotic player down underneath. Any interest here? Chad Brown has sent two horses out in these first two legs, and both have run exceptionally well.
Yeah, Steve, you got. Go ahead, Ellis.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, I was going to just compliment Steve on his segue because I know you wanted to talk about him.
Look, and I have to give Steve Haskin credit for pointing out that I think it's four generations of Belmont winners on the mother's side of the pedigree, sired by Belmont winners. Mom, grandma, great-grandma, great-great-grandmother, all of their sires were Belmont Stakes winners. So if we lean on pedigree for the Belmont Stakes more so than any other race, well, there you have it. The blood is there for the mile and a half. Yeah, barn momentum, you mentioned, Steve, much like a lineup in baseball where hitting is contagious, winning can become contagious. The Claridge Stable, Chad Brown just winning their first classic in a Preakness debut. With Twisted Tom, you have that momentum going forward. You touched on, Practical Joke as well as he ran from the night team post in the Derby, Cloud Computing. And there's a lot of positive momentum, I think, going here with this particular stable. He's not fast. We get it. But slow horses can't win the Belmont Stakes. We've seen that historically. You don't need to be a superstar to win this one. And again, we lean on the bloodlines and the pedigree for the Belmont. Twisted Tom has that in his corner, Ellis.
Yeah, he absolutely does. And what's really interesting here is talking about an angle, one of the angles that comes in the program. It might have been one of the ones you set up, Laffit, if I remember correctly. This is an interesting angle. This is what you would never expect. This is an angle that shows up, of course, on the homepage, and it also shows up when you have your angles turned on. It comes with the program, and you can set the thresholds. I have the threshold basically anything above 6 or 7%, but this is 23, and this is when Chad Brown goes to Javier Castellano, which was very interesting to me. And I'm going to get the actual back test on this. When you click on it, you can see it goes there. 90 times in the last year, Chad Brown switched to had a jockey change to Javier Castellano, and he won 30 out of 90, which you'd expect. Okay, well, the average payout is probably $4 or $5, but no, unfortunately, it's not. It's pretty darn good. The average payoff showed a profit of 23%. So for every $2 you bet, you got $2.46 back. That's what I call just a dumb bet or a monkey bet, I guess. You could just randomly bet this, and so the same reason that I'm kind of enamored of Mike Smith getting on Meantime, I think that a lot of people like yourselves could be excited that Castellano's getting on for Brown here.
That was mind-blowing when we ran that back test, and you figured that Brown going to Castellano in any scenario, because everything Brown sends out gets overbet seemingly in New York, that the addition of Javier Castellano is just going to hurt that number that much more, and showing that kind of profit, again, that's why that back test option and being able to run those stats and see what those figures turn out to be is such a valued aspect of this particular program.
And this would add to it, because even if he goes bet down a little bit, this 20-to-1 morning line is going to add to that ROI if he does run well. And you made a good point, Steve, or if you don't remember, about not slow horses, but one-paced horses. Your one-paced horses do very well. A horse that has a good cruising speed. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not Meantime. Maybe it's Twisted Tom from the rail, and Meantime doesn't get the lead and he can't sit. It's the same opportunity here. So if you are against Irish Warcry, and if Epicaris is either out or you're concerned about him, there's nothing wrong with betting a couple horses in the race like Twisted Tom near his 20-to-1 morning line, and betting Meantime near his 15-to-1 morning line in this race.
Something else, Steve, I think Lynchy pointed out on your show, if you see Meantime breaking out and you see him lathered up and sweating pre-race, don't worry about it, right? He was saying that that's typical of Meantime, much like his sire Shackelford.
He did say that, and the one thing he didn't say was how well Stormy's Song was going to run in the opener today, which we certainly are going to have to talk to him about. That does actually get us and to segue into two topics, and I do see, Ellis, as part of your notes, you've got Senior Investment involved, and I want to bring him up because in addition to the pedigree element that that frequently come into conversation, there's also some unusual flip side pedigree portions. A horse like Senior Investment. Also, when we look at the Brendan Walsh Multiplier, Multiplier is a son of Factor out of a trippy mare, and yet Brendan Walsh, who has really built and enhanced his reputation in marathon type events, he feels that that this is a great spot for Multiplier. And of course, Kenny McPeak has won this race at 70-1 with Saraba. He finished third at 20-1 with Adigan, and he has a pretty good feel for horses from a stylistic standpoint, and horses that are big, long striders, that are big, kind of rangy horses. And you mentioned one pace. This is a good race for them. If we think back to Commissioner and to his harrowing loss, he was a horse who was going to lope around the racetrack running 25-second quarters. That plays very well here. Multiplier is a big, long strider. These are horses that if they check up, it takes a 16th of a mile for them to regather their momentum. But at a racetrack like Belmont, with the enormous sweeping turns, they can get into a loping, basic rhythm. And Senior Investment, as well as he closed in Baltimore on a racetrack that is not necessarily conducive to that style, he could move up even more, I think, at Belmont, where he'll get the slow sloping turns, and his physicality benefits the expanse of Belmont. So there are some factors when it comes to this race that are counterintuitive, and horses like a Multiplier that on paper shouldn't be effective at 1.5 miles, they very well may be, just because of the way they move, their size, their stride, and because of the racetrack. So there are horses, and we're spending as much time as we are on the Belmont because you have to go beyond the obvious in this race, whether it's for a win candidate or whether it's for your exotic pillars.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Multiplier was only a length behind Senior Investment in the Preakness, and he had some trouble here. He had to steady. There was some traffic. There was a lot of trouble in the stretches. Horses were going back into the few closers, and Senior Investment had the same issue. And he actually ran very well to go from 8th to 3rd in the last 1/8 of a mile after having to steady. and then find a place to run. If he runs back, you know, I talked earlier about the 108 Epicaris Equibase speed figure conversion from his UAE races. Senior Investment did something that, for those of you, and I'm sure you, both of you, Laffit and Steve, have watched a number of these mile and 16th races at Keeneland, which end at the first finish line. You know, normally the horses that are in the top 2 or 3 when they turn for home, which is very close to the wire, those are the horses that stay up. And Senior Investment did something you don't normally see. He rallied in the last 50 yards to win the Lexington by a head. And he ran kind of one pace as the field came back to him. So if your pace scenario that you mentioned earlier, you think it's hot, a little juicier than, to use your word, than maybe the projector says it is, and there are 2 or 3 horses out there, not going really fast, but contesting the lead, it plays right into the hands of this horse. So, you know, basically I'm going to use him. I'm going to go over my top 3 picks, and then Laffit can come back and reiterate, or I can just do it for you, Laffit, because I have them on the paper here. But Epicaris is my top choice, but certainly since, you know, we have question marks here, I'm looking at Meantime and Senior Investment. And then for second and third, I just want to throw out, of course, horses that we haven't talked about yet. Looking at Lee, who had that dream trip in the Derby. He finished 4th, beaten 5.5. He was just a length behind, or 3/4 of a length, I should say, behind Senior Investment, half a length, I should say here, behind Senior Investment. He also had some issues at the break, and he may have been a little closer. He likes to come from way last, but I would use him in second and third. I don't think he could win the race. And the other one that's really interesting to me is the 5 Hollywood Handsome. And this is, you know how, Laffit, you started off by saying you're wed to Todd Pletcher. Well, I'm wed to any Triple Crown race that's got Dallas Stewart training in, because
Sure.
I will never be in the red with Dallas Stewart. I didn't have Golden Soul, but I did have Commanding Curve. I did have Tale of Verve and the Preakness under American Pharaoh. And so this horse is kind of interesting. When Stewart decides to go, you know, you could do this. He ran not great, just kind of mediocre in the Louisiana Derby behind Gervin and Patch. He ran pretty mediocre in the Illinois Derby, but I love the fact that Dallas Stewart put him in an allowance race to get a confidence builder in it. And not only that, but he found the right jockey for the horse in Florent Giroux, who rode him for the first time. He got up by a head. He didn't beat anybody specifically, but, you know, we're talking about the figures here. He's on an improving pattern again. I certainly think that I don't know about exactly the distance, but the Tapazar side says he should be okay. So I'm going to use him as well. So I'm going to use Hollywood Handsome and looking at Lee on the bottom, and I'm going to look at Epicaris, Meantime, and Senior Investment on top of my exactas here. So Laffit, why don't you go over your picks, and Steve as well. We can move on to another race on the card.
Yeah, it's Taprit for me. It's the Todd Pletcher 5 weeks in between we have to mention Oaks because of Rags to Riches, Derby and Belmont Stakes. It's an arena in which he thrives in the 2 wins, the 4 runner-up finishes. I have Taprit on top. Was bullish on Epicaris up until everything that's unfolded over the last 24 hours or so. Like I said at the top of the show, going to pay close attention to the international markets and what Epicaris' number is, what he's being offered at. I think that'll be a true indication of what's expected from him in the Belmont Stakes. Twisted Tom, the hot hand of Chad Brown, the pedigree we touched on. Those are the 3 horses I'm gonna focus on. But it's Taprit for the win. Still have no idea what I'm going to do with Epicaris, and expecting a big effort from Longshot, Twisted Tom.
Well, and on my end, right now, my inclination is to, I pretty much do this with my involvement with the Express Bet wagering guide, sticking with the horse that I picked 10 days out, and I'm comfortable with Taprit, but I'm going to substitute Irish War Cry for Classic Empire. I think you're discounting Irish War Cry a little bit too much in terms of preparedness. If Bob Baffert were the guy to say, I like the way my horse is doing, so I'm running, everybody would be cooing. Graham Motion does it, and people are saying, well, he didn't prepare for this spot. So, you know, you got a Polish numbers mare, and you've got a horse that was beaten a Zot in this race himself in Curlin. Irish War Cry, stylistically, certainly could benefit from, you know, loping along. So 2 with Taprit, the 178 and the 610. is pretty much my layers. The 2
and the
with
pattern,
the 178 with the 610.
the pattern says go time, Steve. Look, Irish war cry. He runs out of his mind, he lays an egg. He runs out of his mind, he lays an egg. If it's that every other pattern, it really does bode well for his chances in the Belmont.
Well, and actually, you know, if you are a believer in that, I mean, I think there's a couple of things that worked against him, and frankly, you know, for the people that are advocates of the way the track was playing in Louisville, you know, there's people that are saying, well, Caprit only made up ground when he dropped down to the rail, and you know, people that are, you know, also, you know, saying, you know, Practical Joke was a beneficiary of the inside, and you know, and the winner, and looking at Lee, you know, all the horses that you know that seem to benefit potentially from a good inside. And then when you look at Gormley and Irish War Cry, who were outside, and you know, they kind of sank down you know, late when straightening for home. So if you're a believer that, you know, the inside was the place to be, Gormley and Irish War Cry are horses that you know, you very much could embrace in here.
Fear him, respect him, just too short a price. That's what I'm hanging. The price is what bothers me with Irish War Cry.
Well, you know what? If you cash a ticket, that price looks good.
No arguments here.
Well, I should mention that they're finished at Aqueduct, and certainly a carryover, and it was actually quite a day for at the races guests between Ron Anderson and Rosario and Maya Engelhardt and Mark Cassie. The people that were listening the last couple of days, you won 6 out of the 9 races, including $69 on that first-time starter Crawdaddy for Maya Engelhardt, who wins the Astoria and then comes back and wins the nightcap with the firster. Unbelievable. And of course, Rosario wins 3 of the first 4 races today, and day 1 of the festival in the books. Let's turn our attention to the next race on the Race Lens seminar. We're glad everybody's with us, and Ellis and Laffit. Let's look at the Acorn, where it seems people are lining up against the Kentucky Oaks winner, the aforementioned Bob Baffert and Abel Tasman, and feels like people are running in the other direction, Laffit.
And I'm with them. I'm with them when you're comparing a 2-turn mile and an 8th race in the slop at Churchill Downs to a 1-turn event in this Acorn. Just the complexion, it's totally different. And this is why I'm gonna step away from Abel Tasman. I absolutely love Sweet Loretta in the Acorn, where she is perfect in 1-turn races. This is where she is at her best. You have the combination of Todd Pletcher and Javier Castellano, and you go back and you watch the Beaumont. I understand she was a heavy favorite and she won, but this thing didn't unfold the way they drew it up on the chalkboard. That was an uncomfortable trip for Sweet Loretta. She broke sluggishly. She was sort of rushed up inside of horses. She was on the rail the entire trip. Going into the far turn, it got tight. They had to check just for a moment, and of course then they slipped through on the inside and exploded late and made the field look silly. Now with the switch towards an outside post position, 1-turn racing, that Beaumont win, more impressive than it looks on paper. Love Sweet Loretta in the Acorn.
Yeah, I can't argue with you. She's my second pick, and there's 2 things else that I could mention after all the great stuff you said, Laffit, in that she's making her second start off the layoff. So here she comes back from 5 months off. She runs a new top, a 97 figure, off a 5-month layoff at 7 furlongs, which is a difficult distance to do that. And so she should move forward off of that. What's also something really interesting here, and again, it won't apply this much because we know about Fletcher and Castellano, but I will say that, again, the default comes up with Todd Fletcher, but I have a research, and people can set these up. This is really easy. This is the trainer with today's jockey. It took me a minute to set it up. Now I have it automatically on my drop down. So this is Fletcher with Castellano in the last 2 years. And you can see they won 24%. It's just about to take out, etc. But what's interesting is, and I didn't set this up, so I'll show people how you can modify research, and you can save it as another one. You just have to name it up here on the top, or you can just do it and apply it and see it. In this case, I'm going to go look at Fletcher and Castellano in graded stakes. And there's different grade. You could do all graded stakes, or grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, but I'm going to pick just graded stakes. And that's all I'm changing here. This is Todd Fletcher with Javier Castellano in graded stakes the past 2 years. And this is where it gets a little intriguing again, because you wouldn't expect this, but all of a sudden you go from a -16 return on investment to a +8. 27 wins on 94 starts. I mean, is that surprising to you guys?
Same as the go-to Javier Castellano with Chad Brown. It's shocking. It's surprising. You know they work well together. You know they win a lot together. But then when you see those actual figures on the back, it's surprising.
10-1, 5-1, 7-2, 8-1. So you're going to get a lot of chalk, but you're going to get value. You know, one of my mentors, Tom Brohammer, who wrote a lot of books on handicapping, said, you know, if you live between 5-2 and 7-1, you really can't go wrong because you get a high percentage of winners. You don't take a lot of favorites. You cherry pick the races you're going to bet. You only bet your picks when they're in that range. And this is certainly exactly what these two guys have done together. So Sweet Loretta, I agree. Also, you know, like you said, she's 4 for 4 around 1 turn. In addition to that, she's a grade 1 winner in a grade 1 race. It's one of the old cliches I use, looking for grade 1 winners in grade 1 races. Now, I'll go to my top pick slightly, and this is Union Strike, just because of the value here as she opens at 8-1. This is a filly who's also a grade 1 winner. She won the Del Mar Debutante in the second race of her career last year after running second to American Cleopatra, who we know is American Pharaoh's sister, if I remember correctly. And she ran second in that race. She came back in the Breeders' Cup 2 turns, and she didn't run well at all. She didn't have a lot of trouble here. You can see by the indicator, the triangle there. Ran badly again in the Starlet, but came back mature, and her first race as a 3-year-old was a bang-up race around 1 turn again. So she's got that win around 1 turn, the second place finish here, the win, and then she lost by a head to Benner Island. And this is the race that got me kind of excited because, and I'm going to show the video when you see this, again, the triangle for trouble. Occasionally you want to look at the video, and if you look at the video for this race, you will see that she had a seam completely close on her. And I'm going to skip to pretty much the middle of the race. We don't need to watch all of it. And she will be, if I remember correctly, she was number 3. No, not sorry, wrong. Union Strike was number 2 here.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. And this is after she got loose. Yes, after she got out before the scene. That's right. Well, this is let me back up just a little bit because I forgot where she was here. So she's
on
here,
the fence
by the
there.
way.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And you think she's got a hole to run through, but the leader comes over, takes the path, makes it in tight. She's going to come out. She has to lateral. So she's actually losing ground here by going laterally. And then when he gets her in the clear, she just comes on fast. I think she would have won had she not gotten halfway stopped in that race. So that's when you can watch this video. And sometimes you'll see a comment, you won't agree with it. In this case, I see the comment, as we said in that race, you know, the wonderful Equibase chart called comment, awkward start, altered to 316. That hit, I think she would have won the race. And here she was 4-1 in the 8 belt, and now she's 8-1 here. So Union Strike is my top pick. I know, Laffit, did you have any other horses in this race? Because I want to talk about Abel Tasman really quick again.
No, shoot, go ahead. With Union Strike, that was a courageous effort, except she is stuck inside again. Love Brice Blanc, great guy. Not a lot of experience at Belmont Park. It's a tough assignment for Blanc, I think, trying to maneuver a trip there with Union Strike and timing it just right.
Agree 100%, but 8-1 makes up for a lot of that. So I'm happy to say. Abel Tasman, I'm not running away from Abel Tasman as much as anybody else is. The oaks did fall apart in front of her. The blinkers did help her. She definitely is competitive here. If you just look at that race, it was a 104 Equibase figure. back in the March race at Santa Isabel, the mile and 16. She is cutting back from 2 turns to 1 turn, so I think she'll be in there. So I'm going to use her in my exacta with Sweet Loretta, Unistrike, and Able Tasman. I'm going to box 3 of them. Or I might just take Unistrike, key her with the other 2, because otherwise I'll end up with the 2 favorites. Steve, did you have a different opinion here of anything on this one?
I've struggled with this race because much like the Black-Eyed Susan, and frankly the Oaks too. If we go back 5 weeks, I have found this group a little confusing, and the horse that I'm surprised that neither of you have even broached is a horse that has become something of a talking filly in Salty. And she figures to sit really nice. The 1-turn mile, being out in the 8-hole, really a nice spot for Rosario to survey this field, and she can kind of swoop at will. And the fact that neither of you seem to have much affection for her, I'm wondering if that 4-1 ends up floating even a little higher. I absolutely have no trouble with Able Tasman turning back in here, and Baffert. I mean, look at the way she's prepped for this in the time since the big performance in Kentucky. I loved her as a 2-year-old. I was at Los Al for that Starlet, and I don't see where going back to the 1 turn is an issue with her. In fact, it may even be a positive. And Baffert was, I can think back to the Monday conversation when I asked Baffert what he thought he would do, and he said Acorn. I mean, he didn't even, there wasn't any other consideration. He knew he was going to be cutting her back. So I would be, for those that seem convinced that she's a play against, don't hurt yourself by completely ignoring her. But right now, I mean, Salty, I'm certainly going to have Sweet Loretta on tickets, and Brad Cox continues to be shopping for that first Grade 1 win of his career, what'll be the first of many. And Benner Island, she's been very honest, and it seems that 1 turning is really what she's meant to do. So this is a really fun. The Acorn's always a great race, and I'll annually remind everybody of the best Acorn ever when Champagne Doro won, and I'm still spending that money.
What was it? Wasn't she 33 to 1, something asinine?
He was 40 to 1.
40 to 1. Didn't mean to shortchange you. Listen, don't get me wrong. Like Able Tasman, like Salty, love Sweet Loretta. Not a matter of disrespect to the others. Just love Sweet Loretta.
Which one would be your top pick, Steve?
I'm going to probably end up picking Salty. I'll probably go Salty, Able Tasman.
When we get done here, by the way, we're going to post these selections on our forum, which is for users that you can access. For those that don't know, we talk about it all the time, but up at the top here here it is, on the icon here that takes you right to our little forum, and you can share ideas and see what we have to say once in a while. And I post some things, and other folks do. And certainly, we're going to put up these sort of our selections. I guess I know I have mine in order. Laffit just gave out his, so we have some ideas, and Steve as well.
Nice, very nice. All right, let's press forward, and we'll get into the Woody Stevens, which, much like the Acorn, is one of those races that sees 3-year-olds abandon their 2-turn hopes and dreams and return to the more reasonable. And of course, Laffit, you're going to talk about a horse that we get a bit of a preview on Friday, tomorrow, when Ron Moquette brings Whitmore back off of the terrific performance in Baltimore. And here is the poster horse for resolved issues from classic candidate as a 3-year-old into a dominant sprinter. And Petrov is going to take that same avenue for Moquette.
you can't blame any horseman on the planet for whether you want to call it Derby fever or chasing the dream of a Kentucky Derby or trying to wedge that round peg into a square hole or a square peg into a round hole, however that saying goes. And with Petrov, when you have that kind of ability and pedigree that suggests he would run longer, you get why Ron Moquett was running him in the Smarty Jones in every one of those 3-year-old prep races at Oaklawn, Southwest Rebel, Arkansas Derby. So it didn't pan out. We talked about Classic Empire missing the Belmont Stakes. It may be a blessing in disguise. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise that Petrov just wasn't competitive in the Arkansas Derby. And now turning back to what I believe he is going to do best. Finally, the turn back in distance for Petrov. Maybe this year's Tom's Ready. We saw what happened with Tom's Ready last year, turning back in distance at a huge price and winning the Woody Stevens at a big number coming from off the pace. And while I didn't have Wild Shot in the Pat Day Mile, I was expecting him to run well. He was always kind of caught wide, a little bit one-paced and left laboring late in his 2-turn races. Really snapped to life when they cut him back in distance. I think you're going to see something from Petrov very similar in the Woody Stevens as you did from Wild Shot on the undercard of the Derby in the Pat Day Mile. And love the post.
I think the post is great. To echo what Laffit said, the outside post was talking the speed. And don't forget, it wasn't a horse that went long except for to try the Derby Trail. I mean, the Derby Trail. You know, he broke his maiden very nicely. Lenstar scratched out of a race, I think, today at Belmont to run, but he's a good horse. And then he got beat ahead at the King Swan Stakes, $100,000 very early in the middle of the 2-year-old season. Not disgraced at all with the 2 runner-up finishes here in the 2-turn races, and then beaten 2 lengths, basically not 2 lengths. Now like to see 1 off by 2. I mean, Petrov could have easily finished second and fourth in this race, given that Songbird and Untrapped and V were at all different parts of the track, but separated by head. So the cutback is really good. He's certainly my topic as well. Laffit and I completely agree. I'm going to use Wild Shot also because he did cut back and proved himself. That was a huge effort. Going from these kind of numbers to a 110 figure and just being in front at the 8th hole with nobody having any chance of getting him in that race certainly is a horse to contend with. Of course, you know, you're getting 8-1, now you're getting 4-1. And American Anthem will be my third pick here, coming off a 7-furlong race. Got Baffert, of course, and he's going to be bet down a little bit. He was 4-5 last time out in the Ferrera, which is a grade 3. But another horse that it's the exact same thing we just talked about. The horse is a mile and an eighth, and he runs badly, and all of a sudden you cut him back to 7 furlongs and kaboom. You know, and Baffert found the right spot for him. It was a 5-horse field. I get that. So I'm using Petrov, Wild Shot, and American Anthem. I know Laffit, you have a nice price to go along here with Petrov.
Yeah, and he's, I believe, 20-1 on the morning line in Hard Scramble. For trainer Steve Asmussen and Irad Ortiz, you have that same combination from a season ago that won the Belmont Stakes with Creator, and they're teaming up again, and Asmussen going with a local guy. He does believe with experience at Belmont Park, knowing exactly when to pull the trigger to make that right move is important, the local rider. So the combination of Ortiz and Asmussen could be a big day for them, and just improving and making that graded stakes debut for trainer Steve Asmussen. I think there's some real upside there, his speed, his fight as he continues to improve. I think Hard Scramble at a big number. Don't leave him off your tickets.
Well, I'm using 3 horses that none of you have even suggested.
Lovely.
I played Recruiting Ready defensively in Baltimore. I think he's the speed here, and frankly, the speed of any of the speeds. I don't see who's going to be running with him. I won't pick him on top. The horse I want to pick on top is Gold for the King. The New York bred from the great Charlie Baker. And Baker won the New York Stallion race at 6.5 with him and immediately pointed for the Woody Stevens. You may have heard Ron Anderson with me the other day, and Anderson is kicking himself that he lost this mount for Rosario. And at 15-1, Charlie Baker, thank you very much, with the New York bred. 4, 3, and 10. I've got to go back to Long Haul Bay, who certainly, is eligible in this spot. 4-3-10 for me in here.
That was a genuine, frustrated Ron Anderson, by the way, Steve, on your show. He was frustrated about zigging when he should have zagged and losing the mount on this particular gelding. I forgot about that until you mentioned it. I'm saying, who is he talking about? And who is Rosario wind up riding? He is frustrated that he, quote unquote, messed this thing up or made a wrong option about the Woody Stevens. It's a good point. You can tell what he thinks and what he's expecting from Gold for the King and the Woody Stevens.
Absolutely. Woody Stevens, the first step on the road to I was going to say King's Bishop, but now it's the Allen Jerkins. Let's get to the Metropolitan Handicap, and of course, one of the great races every single year. And I know some people looked at the probables and said, "Oh, it's not a great Metropolitan." Once you open the PPs, you may change your mind because it's an absolutely terrific race. I know, Laffit, you looked at a horse that's an alternative for the Paul Pompa team. Paul was going to be sending out the favorite in Connect, whose career may actually be over, but he does send two horses, and he's got Rally Cry that's going to go, as well as Tommy Macho.
No Connect, no problem for owner Paul Pompa, who everything he touches these days seemingly turns to gold. I just can do no wrong. No Connect, no problem. Rally Cry, 5-1 on the morning line. That momentum. We talked about Todd Pletcher, John Velasquez winning their first Kentucky Derby together. Finally, I think they get their third Met Mile win together with Rally Cry, rapidly, steadily improving. And I like to see, when you're talking about race shape, and especially in these one-turn races, horses with tactical speed, I like an outside post position. What you get with Rally Cry is the two posts, but he's proven he can be as effective in that limited room to operate from an inside post position. So I'm not concerned whatsoever about the number 2 post. Rally Cry, 2 for 3 at Belmont Park. I think he has the goods and enough upside, enough talent to win a race as celebrated, as prestigious and important as the Met Mile.
Well, I will echo what he said. He's my top pick as well. So I'll echo what Laffit said. Rally Cry is just really interesting in terms of the fact that he just ran a stakes quality race in the allowance race at Belmont. It was a one-turn mile, and 16th is a one-turn mile, so it's really the same race he just ran. If he does anything like that again, certainly he could run a big race, and I hope we get somewhere in the neighborhood of 7-2, 4-1. Certainly be worth playing for me. We know about Fletcher and Velasquez. We've been over all that. Really, no knocks, but that's the big thing that jumps off the page at me. The 3-year-old that just ran a best race, and I think he's not going to regress because he's had some good time off and should run well. I'm going to go to the outside on the 12 Awesome Slew. I know Laffit has some comments about him. I'll let Laffit talk about him, and I'll just kick in a couple of words.
Yeah, I think he. I'm not using Salty in the Acorn, but in Mark Cassidy, I trust for the Met Mile here with Awesome Slew. That half-mile drill on the second fastest of 54. I think the fastest of 54 at that drill, gearing up for this Met Mile. And while I'm okay with Rally Cry with a number 2 post position because he's proven from in there, huge post position switch for Awesome Slew. Breaking from the outside, he was stuck down along the inside, finished second in a field of 12 at Churchill Downs, and now has that extreme outside cozy post position that I know every rider would rather have in the 2-turn races, horses with tactical speed. And now he's going to come from about mid-pack. But there's so many more options with a jockey from outside. So I love the post position switch for Awesome Slew, and just a different horse since being recommitted to one-turn racing. We discussed Petrov in the Woody Stevens, going back to a sprint, going back to a middle distance one-turn race. Same deal with Awesome Slew. This is what he needs to be doing, one-turn middle distance racing.
And this gives me a chance to show a really cool new feature in Race Lens. You could link out to charts every time, and most people know that when you see a horse on Talix, you want its next start. But sometimes you might see a horse that's finished second or third, and you want to check on it. When you go to the chart now, in the chart itself, we're doing something that hasn't been done before. We're actually circling the name of any horse that's won his next race. So for those that understand, I know most listeners do, I know you too, Steve and Laffit, when you're looking for key races now, you can find them at a glance. You don't have to go back and look at every horse's PPs. And I don't know what race it was. There was a couple of races on the card, and I can't find them right this second, where I looked at a chart and saw 3 or 4 horses that won their next race out of a certain race. So I immediately knew that was a key race. And that's really nice. The Limousine Liberal came back to win the Aristides last week at Churchill Downs, and that's a good example. So on a separate note, not just about this particular race in handicapping, but if you see one horse in italics, this is a tip now, if you see any horse in italics in a chart, and just one, in this case you're seeing 2 where I'm pointing to this race with the Sunshine Million, but if you see one, take a second and click on the chart, because you might see the 4th or 5th or 6th finishers all came back to win a race in which your horse finished 3rd or something, and they've already come back to win, and he's running now. And that's an opportunity, I think we can all agree. Key races don't come along that often, and sometimes races are really, really prolific in terms of giving out next out winners.
Nice. Well, there's a couple of horses we may want to call attention to, and in addition to, Awesome Slew, who you mentioned, let me point out a couple of big prices. Virtual Machine of David Canizzo's. This horse was improving for Joe Sharp, and he's really moved forward a quantum amount under the care of Canizzo, and as a 4-year-old. He's a Drosselmeyer, and there's plenty of reason to believe that he's a horse that was going to get better as he aged. And that performance, Connect was going to be favored in this race, right? Well, Virtual Machine was a very solid second to Connect, and he's going to be 30-1 morning line, and he's going to be 30-1 when the gates open. And I don't think there's any reason to doubt that Virtual Machine is a horse, particularly even going back to that race 2 back as well, in when he ran off at Aqueduct on the inner. Virtual Machine was a horse I wanted to bet in Pennsylvania last week. He scratched for the tougher spot, and I think he's very usable. Denman's Call, I was there that day, San Felipe Day, when he won the Triple Bend with an absolute blitzkrieg move up the rail under Tyler Bays. He seemed to regress at Churchill and on the wet track, and in fact, all 3 times he's encountered moisture in a racetrack, he really has not run all that well. So put a line through those wet track races, look at that Triple Bend, and why isn't Denman's Call live in this race? All you got to do is think back to the nice Breeders' Cup Mile, Dirt Mile winner of O'Neill's, the 2 years in a row.
Golden Sense.
Golden Sense. Denman's Call has got California speed. Tyler Bays has got very little else to think about for Saturday, and Denman's Call is going to be on my tickets too.
Yeah, I don't know if we're looking for a... Go ahead, Ellis.
No, finish up with you.
Just saying that I don't know that we're looking for a frosted-like performance from anyone in this field, but you mentioned Denman's Call. Virtual Machine, 30-1. Mohaymen at 20-1. Economic Model. You want to get a better read on what we can expect from Twisted Tom in the Belmont Stakes? See how Economic Model performs in the Met Mile. They've been training together. Deep contentious editions of this year's Met Mile. Just to echo your sentiment, Steve, at the top of when we started looking at this race about what kind of Met Mile we were looking at, one that is, there are layers and layers to this race, and contender after contender you can make a case for at big numbers.
Yeah, and I don't want to ignore the favorite, Sharp Ass Secca here, because he wasn't serious at all, beaten a couple of lengths, 3/4 of a length per second in the Godolphin Mile, and then now he's back in the U.S. and back on Lasix. His race in the heart of the mile at Gulfstream, that 1-turn mile was a 125. In Equibase speed figure terms, you only see about 3 or 4 125s the entire year. So this is a heck of a horse here. You got to use him as well. And I wanted to point out to Steve, by the way, Denman's Call is my third pick. My picks were Rally Cry, Awesome Slew, and Denman's Call. But you could do lots of things here. More Spear is another horse we didn't mention, but he's the second. He's actually the favorite at 5-2. And there's Stafford again with Smith. You know, the number one team in the world right now with Arrogant. You know, and another horse that he shipped out of California to win the Essex. He shipped out back to California, then back out to win Lone Star. He shipped back to California and put in this big workout here. 46 and 6, second best of 76, and now he ships in to New York for this race. So this is a heck of an edition of the Met Mile.
It's nice of you to say too, because this happens to be one of those bizarre circumstances where people were deriding the race, and I just was mystified, because when you looked at the the accomplishments, and you look at the kind of company these horses have kept, it to me had outstanding wagering opportunity written all over it. So a lot of fun. Let's try to arc towards a wrap up and some thoughts about maybe Friday. Ellis, I know that you've got some interest tomorrow. Maybe taking a stand against Chad Brown in the New York.
Well, it was a segue here. Let me get to change days here real quick. But hey, real quick, Steve, what were your picks for the Manhattan? So I can write them, and if I'm sorry, for the Met, so I can write them down for our listeners and put them on our forum.
Well, if I had to give you
I'm sorry to put
the bottom
to your head.
Well, top to bottom, I'll give you 9, 12, 310.
Okay. So the reason I wanted to add a few minutes here to our webinar and go over this is because there is a special daily double. There's two of them actually. There's one of them from the Belmont Gold Cup, that 2-mile race to the Belmont. But the one that's much more interesting to me, because there's some value in both races, is the 9th race on Friday, the New York Stakes, to the Met Mile. It's a special double you can play. I believe they actually opened wagering on it today on some of the ADWs, but you could certainly play it tomorrow. And this is a great opportunity race here. So I'll kick it off with the number 1 Cadura. And this is an angle that I set up. We have one like it. Actually, I think this is one of the angles that came with the program. And this is, one of the great things about race funds, I tell people when I talk to them on the phone or by email, is one of the things it does is you don't have to go looking for stuff as much. It comes to you. So in the past, I might have looked for horses that had the 8, 9, 10 post on a turf route in their previous race, and now they're on the inside. Well, we've got this angle here, which is from the outermost post to post 1. And this is a definite 1-to-1 relationship. So the horse was on the definite outside, 8th in an 8-horse field last time out, gets the rail this time. Well, it doesn't come up quite a lot, but when you look at this, you'll know why I kept it as one of my active angles, because 126 starts over the last year. It only won 14% of the time. But if you bet it, you had a 38% positive profit from a horse going from the extreme outside one race to the rail in the next. Can I hear some explanations, Laffit?
It's awesome.
Yeah, I was amazed. So, again, now I don't have to go looking for that. I have another one, which is like the last 3 to the first 3. But this one comes up and was really interesting. So you've got Cadura moving from the outside to the inside, a horse that wasn't disgraced at all. And, by the way, when you look at the 2 horses that she ran against, I might get some people mad, but I'm going to say these are the best 2 female turf horses in the world right now, in Dickinson and Lady Eli. Lady Eli, of course, came back to win the Grade 1 Gamely. She needed that race after layoff. Dickinson is running in the Justy game, which Lady Eli won last year. And here, Cadura was beaten, a length and a half to both of them. So it's not a huge price on Cadura here. She opens at 5-1, but she's my top pick because that's where the value lies in this race. Real quickly, of course, the obvious horses, the 8 Decida, who I just keep jumping around on me so much. Decida, who is a multiple Grade 6 winner, including the Grade 1 Diana last year, she got beat in the Hawksmoor. She might have needed the race coming back September to May. She can get the last quarter in about 22 seconds, which is flying. And then C. Khaleesi, these are the two favorites in the race, kind of obviously. She won the Sheepshead Bay. I could certainly make a case for Suffused as well. I think Laffit will talk about her in a second. But my picks in the New York are Kadura, Deceit, and C. Khaleesi. And I'll be playing them in my daily double from the New York Stakes to the Met Mile to our pick, Rally Cry.
Going in a different direction, Ellis, and by the way, every time somebody mentions Decita, I always remember her U.S. debut and the looks on people's faces that were walking around. They had just been hit over the head with a club because it was about a half an hour after American Pharoah was defeated by Keen Ice in the Travers Stakes. It was like there was a graded stakes running on the grass at Saratoga, and everybody was still in like this haze as a result of actually seeing American Pharoah lose. However, in this New York, where Chad Brown went 1, 2, 3 last year, and everything Brown touches, as we know in New York, it's bet, and over bet. Going in different directions, I like Suffused exiting the Sheep's Head Bay. Go back and watch the race at the top of the stretch. Carmouche had to hesitate just a moment, lost just a little momentum before splitting rivals. And now you're getting the switch from Carmouche. This is nothing against Kendrick Carmouche. It's just that he's not Jose Ortiz at Belmont Park. Ortiz was at Churchill to ride Tappert in the Derby. So Ortiz jumps back in the saddle, which is, I think, is a key angle with Suffused in the New York. Also, I just think she's better on firm ground. The Sheep's Head Bay was on yielding, much softer ground at the heart of the surface. I think the more effective Suffused will be, and her record at 1.25 miles, 6 starts, 3 wins, 3 second-place finishes. While the Brown fillies, and rightfully so, will be hammered, I think Suffused does drift up there in the 6 to 7 to 1 range, and I'll go with her in a very contentious edition of the New York.
Well, certainly that's a good play, and I could certainly add her into my mix as a fourth horse for the trifecta.
Well, finally, guys, let's slip in, since we've gone this far, let's slip in the Manhattan because there's a European that is invading that I think deserves some conversation. We also have maybe a morning line miscue, a rare one from Eric Donovan in terms of time test, who is 5 to 1 and probably will be half that. A very good group of 9 in the Manhattan, and of course, break out your lyrics to Sidewalks of New York to sing before the horses run the Manhattan.
Well, I think Laffit and I agree with this one. We both came up with the same horse, so I think you're right, Steve. If you like him as well, you can forget about anything near 5 to 1.
Well, somebody better put the lid on Potemkin, because he's becoming the buzz horse of buzz horses for this Manhattan. I did wind up with time test in the fact that he's 3 for 4 at the 1.25 mile distance. Similar reasons to why I'm going with Suffused in the New York. It's like we remember time test from being just drilled by Tepin in the Breeders' Cup Mile the fall before last at Keeneland. That's when I think American racing fans were first really introduced to him. The mile was too sharp for him. He's better going longer. The Manhattan distance is right up his alley. Defeated at 2 to 5 on yielding ground in Fort Marcy, in the Fort Marcy guys. But again, just another example. And again, the angles are similar between he and Suffused. Better at 1.25 miles and better on firm ground. Feel very confident about time test going forward in the Manhattan on Saturday.
Yeah, and even though he loses Ortiz, you've got that great angle with Chad Brown switching to Castellano. Certainly, he's good. He should benefit from the race. He's a Group 2 winner in Group 1 place, but a Group 2 winner in England, mile and 5/16. So this is perfect for him. You talked about Potemkin, and Potemkin is a buzz horse. He had Lasix for the first time. He ran all these good races, and all of a sudden you see a bad one. He's a Group 1 winner, so I got to use him as well at 8 to 1. Andreas Wohlers had good success. We talked about Rosario. I don't know if Ron Anderson said anything about this horse, Steve, but certainly Potemkin is a horse that's 118 equivalent Equibase speed figure back here in the Group 2, and then the Group 1 win certainly have me intrigued by Potemkin. So he's my second pick under time test in the Manhattan.
Yeah, I've got the same, the same thought process as well. Time test, Potemkin, and can't wait to lay eyes on Potemkin. I bet he's built like a battleship.
Touché, my friend, touché.
And of course, you got to watch out for Beach Patrol, who is so gutty and who lays it out every time. Down inside, going to save ground for Florent Giroux and Jim Cavello. And Divisadero is going to put in his run, no doubt. I played world approval defensively in Baltimore, and I'll probably do the same thing again. As much of a fan as I am of Live Oak and Mrs. Weber, I think last time was the time. He ran a tremendous race, but I think last time, to use an Andy Serling line, last time was the time. Let's wrap it up. Speaking of time, want to remind everybody, I do want to ask about Songbird. We'll get to that momentarily. But again, you've got a chance to save nearly $500 and 50% off an annual subscription to Stats Race Lens, good through Sunday. And you can't push this enough, because this savings literally, limited time offer, all the provisos, act now, don't miss out, etc. If you've been enamored with the product and you want more time with it, give yourself the gift of nearly $500 in savings. Let's talk about Songbird, who was out there today schooling. And speaking of battleships, she is a different young lady. She is in full bloom, and she looks like a bigger, more imposing version of the Mercurial filly from a year ago, Laffit.
So cool. It's like she took the loss in the Breeders' Cup Distaff personally, like the athlete who falls just short in a championship game and goes back to the weight room and comes back bitter, better, faster, stronger. I feel as though that's what we're seeing with Songbird, and so excited about what we're going to see in her 4-year-old campaign. I know that she was missed out west in that 3-horse race that turned out to be a barn burner in its own right, with the John Stellar Wind and the Bob Baffert trained filly. The fact that she's here in New York as part of this Breeders' Cup in the Spring type program on the undercard of the Belmont Stakes, seeing Songbird in the Ogden Fifths, it's fitting. This is where she should be, and you have to just tip your cap to Jerry Hollendorfer and the fact that he's never hesitated, he's never been shy about it. He's traveled back and forth to the East Coast with her on several different occasions. There's so much confidence surrounding this filly, and just a special part of this program, seeing Songbird resurface on Saturday in the Fifths.
Well, all I needed.
Sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say all I needed to see in terms of perhaps, thinking she might be vulnerable first race back and all that. All I needed to see was the picture Zoe Cadman put up on Twitter of Jerry Hollendorfer smiling. Who knew he had teeth?
That's all I need to know. You didn't have to see Songbird. You just had to see Jerry.
Well, she was there too. Smiling, and Hollendorfer with literally a grin, and it was. I admit it. It was a lot like when Christina Ricci smiles in that scene in Addams Family Values, but it was in fact great to see Jerry smiling.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. I would say that the only thing about this race I would add from a betting perspective is, it's an opportunity to turn 1 to 5 into 5 to 2 maybe. And so I'm going to play Songbird over Highway Star, who has become a star. 4 wins in her last 5 races. The last 2 as a newly turned 4-year-old. The best races of her career, 104, then a 114, or a second best, and then the best. Certainly Belmont, she's 4 for 4. You know, she's not in the same league as Songbird in terms of heart, but she certainly is right now in terms of her style. I might turn around for a buck, so I'm going to play Songbird over Highway Star. I'm going to play Songbird over Bar of Gold, who just got beat by Highway Star a half length. I think she really turned it around. It was her second off the layoff. She came back and didn't do a thing here at 8-5 in the Plenty of Grace, but in the Ruffian, she got within a head and she fought all the way to the wire. So they open at 10 and 12 to 1 on the morning line. So I'm thinking maybe, like I said, for if I bet $2 exactness for $4, I'll get $10 or $12 back. That's 5 to 2, 3 to. That's 2 to 1 for $12 or 15. So I'm getting 2 to 1 instead of 1 to 5, and that's a moral victory.
If you're going to take a run at Songbird, I guess theoretically, fresh horse, traveling, all the. I
think we lost Laffit.
Present.
But I think we got a little interference there. If everybody's still there?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, well, all right. You're breaking up on me a little bit, guys. So I will just wish everybody the best of luck. We'll thank Laffit Pincay III. Laffit, the TV schedule tomorrow and Saturday.
Tomorrow, 5 o'clock, it's just an hour show for the Belmont Gold Cup, NBCSN Saturday early for the undercard. A lot of focus on the undercard races because that's really part of the story. It's the entire program. It's not just the Belmont Stakes. And then, of course, later on, NBC for the final jewel of the 2017 Triple Crown. Looking forward to it.
Outstanding. And, Ellis, your weekend plans and selections and places that everybody can hear you and read you.
Well, I got a couple of things in the morning I'll be tweeting about. I'm doing an interview with Drake in the morning in New Orleans, in Memphis, and a show in Fayetteville, Arkansas. But those will be, I'll be tweeting out the live links in the morning, early Eastern time, but mostly my detailed selections for the entire Friday card and Saturday, of course, available at Equibase and all the ADWs, NyraBet, TwinSpires, ExpressBet, TVG, etc. They can get my almost 7 pages of analysis for Saturday's card and almost as much for Friday, and some great betting opportunities both days. And our race of the week, of course, is the Belmont Stakes, available at Equibase and America's Best Racing.
Outstanding. I want to thank all of the developers and all of the team at Stats Racelands, who you should be following on Twitter, and of course the community, which continues to grow and be active, exchanging ideas and hints about using the product, and we hope that everybody continues to succeed and score out using Stats Racelands. We love talking to everybody with our opinions, and we hope that it helps you win tomorrow and Saturday. And until next time, best of luck. Enjoy Belmont weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Good luck, everybody.